Thanks for stopping by the channel today. This is part 2 of my interview with John and Patty Franklin. If you missed part 1, you can go back to the previous video and you'll want to watch that first. John and Patty have more stories for us. They're also going to be talking about grandchildren, legacy, and God's faithfulness. How about sharing with us a little bit about going back into the workplace again? And as you said, you were able to travel independently. It wasn't without some real complicated situations at times. So do you have something from the book that, or just something that comes to mind that you'd like to share about that?
Yeah, I put a couple of stories in there. And again, my work situation just turned out to be, if you could write up some ideal situation about what you'd want your employer to do when this kind of thing had happened to you, it seemed like that was the situation I was able to go back into work. The company was really very good about giving me a lot of room. I had learned that the only way to make things work was for me to be very communicative about what I could do or what I couldn't do, and then try to find a path. And eventually the path led back to my doing the job that I had done beforehand, which involved a lot of business travel. And the event I think I'm going to share happened actually in 1996. So this was quite a time after I was paralyzed, but it was a trip to Oklahoma City. And it was actually the only time I had ever gone to Oklahoma City. And I won't give the details, but there were just it was a strange circumstance. And my boss said, "You're going to need to go to Oklahoma City because there's an important meeting. And you actually don't have to do anything at this meeting, but you have to be there. And if you're not there, we won't be able to make a sale to this important client. You'll be meeting up with a guy who's going to do the entire presentation. So all you have to do is show up, introduce this guy, and then he'll handle it from there." So this other guy's name was Dave. And so I was flying to Oklahoma City from Los Angeles. He was flying there from New York, and he had been to Oklahoma City a lot. And so before the trip occurred, he had contacted me and said, "John, I always stay at this one, particular hotel, and it's a nice place, and that's where I'd recommend that you stay." And I said, "Great, we'll stay there. We'll both fly in the night before, and we'll meet up for lunch, and then we'll go off to this meeting." So the plan was set in motion. My flight, there's no way to fly directly into Oklahoma City. So my flight went into Houston and then into Oklahoma City. And when the plane landed in Oklahoma City, they were supposed to bring my wheelchair up to me. That was the normal process, but they didn't. And so they finally put me in one of their wheelchairs and wheeled me down to customer service, where I found out that my wheelchair had arrived on the flight, but there were no batteries for the wheelchair. It was a power wheelchair, and somehow they had separated the batteries and nobody knew where they were. So for the next couple hours, we sat there while they tried to track them down, and they finally found out the batteries had continued on the original flight, and they were at LaGuardia Airport in New York. So I wound up the ride to take me to the hotel was there waiting for a couple hours while we were hammering this all out. So he took me to the hotel, and I kind of presumed on him my wheelchair couldn't go anywhere without the electric power. And I was not nearly, you'd have to be this, Arnold Schwarzenegger to be strong enough to make the thing go without the electric power. So I presumed on my driver to kind of push the wheelchair into the hotel up to the front desk. And then as I checked in, I explained to the clerk at the front desk kind of what my situation was, and could he have one of the bellmen at the hotel push my wheelchair up to the room and help me get settled. And they were very accommodative. It wasn't a big hotel, but it was a nice place and very nicely run, just like Dave had told me. So they took me up to my room, and I had the bellman kind of situate me, in a place, and I hadn't had a chance to eat dinner or anything. So when he left, I picked up the phone and ordered room service and had them come up, but I had to explain to them that I couldn't come to the door because I couldn't move the wheelchair at all. So could they just come in and bring the meal into me? And so they did. I had them kind of lay it on the bed, and I could kind of reach over and have the meal. And then when I had finished, a half an hour later, I had to call them again and come and pick it up. And I'd also had to tell them, okay, when you come to the door, you're going to have to let yourself in and then, pick up the meal. And so within an hour there had been one bellman who took me up to the room, another who brought in the meal, another who took away the meal. And before the evening was over, I had to have a fourth person come and wheel me into the bathroom so that I could wash up and then get me, back to around the bed where I could at least get myself undressed and get into the bed. And all this time knowing that we didn't know when those batteries were ever going to show up again. So the next morning when I woke up, starting at about 8 o'clock, I just started calling people. Where were the batteries? Were they going to come back in? So the airline folks said, well, the good news is we have located them at LaGuardia Airport. They are going to be on a flight back to Oklahoma City, but they won't get in till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and our meeting was at 1 o'clock, so at that point I thought, okay, desperation, I'm going to have some ideas. And so I started calling medical equipment companies in Oklahoma City and said to them, hey, do you have a wheelchair I can rent for the day? I spent about an hour doing that without success, but around 10 o'clock in the morning, I called this one outfit and they said, well, we don't have a wheelchair you can rent, but we have the batteries for the exact same model wheelchair you have, and it's on one of our wheelchairs now. We won't rent it to you, the wheelchair to you, but we could rent you the batteries. And so I said, well, could you come over to the hotel, and drop off the batteries for me and install them? And they said, yes, we'd be happy to do this. And again, it's not like a long relationship I had. I'm just throwing myself on their mercy because I'm there in Oklahoma City and I'm supposed to meet Dave for lunch at 11:30. And we're supposed to go to this meeting that he cannot do without me. I have to be at that meeting. So the people come over to the hotel, they put the batteries onto my wheelchair, hook it all up. It's 11:15 at this point. And then I say to them, okay, can I arrange with you to come to Oklahoma City Airport at about 3 o'clock so that at that point, if you meet me at the particular airlines, they're going to have my other batteries. We can take your batteries off, put my other batteries on, and I can go on the next leg of my flight. And again, they said, yes, we'd be happy to do this. At that point, I went downstairs. Dave and I are meeting for lunch, and he knows exactly what he wants to order because he's been at this place a lot of times before. I'm kind of reading the menu, and we're sitting in the coffee shop, and the coffee shop is right by kind of a walkway, and where the bellmen are kind of going back and forth. And this one bellman kind of walks by us and says, and it's one of the people that had helped me the night before. And he said, oh, hello, Mr. Franklin. And I kind of said hi to him. And then about 2 minutes later, a second bellman walked by and says, oh, hello, Mr. Franklin. How are you doing? And it was another one of the people that had helped the night before. Well, then before we even had a chance to order like lunch, 3 more bellmen had walked by and they had all just said hello to me. And at that point, Dave just almost slammed down his menu and said, wait a minute, what is going on here? He said, I've been at this hotel, I don't know how many times before. You tell me you've never been here. And why are all these people saying hi to you and they're not saying anything to me? So I then related this entire story, which he then thought was hilarious. He just kind of burst out laughing. A few more bellmen before we finished the meal came by. I like knew all the bellmen in this entire like hotel. We had our meal together. We went over to the meeting. I did my 30-second introduction of him. He made a great presentation. He was like, I wish I could have worked with him more. He was a great person to work with. He wound up making the sale. We went, we went back to the airport. He flew back to New York. I waited for my batteries to come in from LaGuardia Airport. And at 3 p.m., sure enough, they were there. They switched them. I went on the next leg of my flight. Fortunately, nothing else happened for the whole rest of the flight. But in the book, I called that particular incident the batteries and the bellman. And that was things weren't always that dramatic when I took trips, but there were quite a number of times that unusual things happened. It was travel in a wheelchair and live a life of adventure. Yeah. And that's kind of what my life was like.
I remember in the book, you talked about the fact that you actually were given some training in how to advocate for yourself. And I remember as I was reading about it, thinking how valuable and necessary that would be. And this is one of those situations where you can really see that you had to be able to ask for things.
Yeah. And what you're referring to is when I was at the rehab hospital, 95% of the time I was just dealing with an occupational therapist and a physical therapist. But there was 1 week where they said, we want you to attend a class. And the class is called assertiveness training. And at the time, it sounded like the silliest thing I ever heard of. I thought, why in the world do I have to go to a class with assertiveness training? Now, if I had known what was going to happen to me the next 10 years, like you said, Cheryl, I would have appreciated it. It turned out to be one of the most important things they did for me. But at the time, my reaction was assertiveness. Being assertive is being kind of like pushy, rude, abrasive. And I thought, I grew up in New Jersey. Nobody has to teach me any of those things. Everybody in New Jersey knows how to do that, But it turned out what they meant by assertiveness training was they meant understand how to ask for help in very clear and precise manner. And don't be relying on everybody else to read your mind or to try to understand what your needs are. If your wheelchair breaks down, you're going to have to know enough about your wheelchair to help a person understand how to fix it and give them instructions. So it turned out to be something that, I used, I related to one time in 1996, but I used that assertiveness training almost from the moment I left the rehab hospital. That turned out to be important. And even today, now 36 years later, there's people I still need to ask for help. Mm-hmm. And at least the feedback I'm getting from them is thank you for explaining what the needs are, because they still can't read my mind even today. But if I tell them what I'm looking for and how they can help me, then it seems like we get to the right place. And then I'm less frustrated because people aren't trying to imagine what I need or try to think even what would they like in the circumstance. Unfortunately, I found out that what I would like in the circumstance is often not like what other people would want.
Yeah.
And so I've had to tell some people that's a great idea, but it doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And so that assertiveness training, even though at the time, I just thought it was ridiculous, but it turned out to be terrific.
Your move to Georgia was how many years ago now?
7.
7 years ago. Okay. You left California, decided to move near your daughter, Amy, and her family. And that opened some new doors for you as grandparents, didn't it? To be close
Yes.
in
Yes.
proximity to them and see them, you said, pretty regularly, huh?
Yeah, we found a house that is literally down the street from our daughter Amy and her family, and we're fortunate enough to have 4 grandchildren who can either walk to our house or ride their bikes. But I thought Patty could kind of talk about some of the things we've been able to do with our grandkids, because for us it was we had never been this close to grandchildren before. It was always a special visit to see grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And now it became much more routine. We're seeing them every week. They're over here for one afternoon.
This channel is about legacy, and it's about making the most of our days, no matter what our age is. So, yeah, share some of the passion that you have for this and how that has played out with your grandkids.
Well, we were talking about this, and we didn't really come with a game plan because we didn't really know everybody well enough and have a sense of what would be the best thing. But really, I think the Lord has just opened doors for us, and we love classic movies, and we decided that was really something we wanted to do with the grandchildren, is introduce them to all these movies. And so it's had its hilarious moments, but it turns out they love the movies. We started sort of with some Disney movies, and of course they were in color, but most of the movies we watch with them are made in the 1930s, 1940s, maybe the 1950s. And just the other day, we told the kids, okay, today we're going to be watching this movie. It's one they've seen before. It was made in 1942, and they all cheered. Oh, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful to, share that with them. And I always think it's funny because they complain about their friends. Like, they don't even know who Abbott and Costello are. They've never seen Laurel and Hardy. What's the matter with these people? So it's become like our kind of thing to do together. One of the things we decided to try is I have a collection of teacups, and we tried, I thought of this idea, maybe occasionally for lunch, instead of having peanut butter and jelly, we would have a tea. And so we do still have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but maybe a couple of others. We make scones, we have fresh fruit, we have something sweet at the end, and it has become a highlight. And when your 13-year-old grandson walks in, sees the table all set up and goes, "Oh, good, a tea." It's like, who does that? So it's, they love choosing their own teacup. They help prepare the food. They help eat all of the food. And we do it when all of the grandkids are together. It's a huge event, and they all seem to absolutely love it. And so that's something we do regularly. Let's see. Oh, I know. I love to read. And so the grandkids read a lot too. And as they've gotten older, we'll sit around and talk about books. And like John said, they've lent me books to read. They said, "Oh, I love this book." And so now they want me to read it. And then we get to talk about it and enjoy it together. So that has been a really, really fun thing to do. And, going to sports events or piano recitals or things. And I told John, one of the great things I think about being this close to them and seeing them this often is, like, after a movie, we'll come out, sit around, and then we just talk. What they're homeschooled, but they're involved in a ton of things, and between church and extracurricular activities and things like that. So we can talk about spiritual things. We talk about how are things going with their friends. We talk about the craziness with phones. you know.
Right. And one of the kind of funny things that happened just a few months into this, we had just moved here, and Patty and I had decided that we knew our grandkids would be at our house a lot. We decided our house cannot be a shrine. It has to be a place that grandkids can kind of do their thing in. And so early on, I think it was the first time we hit the fall season or the Christmas season. Patty thought, hey, let's let the grandkids help us decorate the house, put up decorations, eventually decorate the Christmas tree. And they all loved going around and doing that. But then we found out about a week later, one of the grandkids, when they returned home after this experience, and said to our daughter Amy, Mom, what's the matter with you? Why can't we do this stuff here? You know, to which Amy answered, it's because like I'm a mom with 4 kids. That's why. You know, so one of the things the grandchildren learned, and also we learned, is there's some things we can do because we just have a little more time on our hands. So we can do some of these things that our children can't necessarily do with their kids because they're dealing with all the bigger issues, but we can kind of come in and do some special things for them. And so the thing of decorating the house, they don't harass Amy anymore about that, but that's
they can do it here.
That's one of the things they regularly do each spring, each fall, each Christmas. There's several times a year that they get to help decorate the house and kind of make it a little more, you know, their place as well as ours.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that just happened is we've told them some stories, a couple of stories about our courtship, which they just were amazed by. And one of the things that I realized is we have this beautiful tea set that we got in Chinatown on our honeymoon. And so just this last week, we got Panda Express and we got to use this beautiful teapot and cups with our Panda Express. And the kids absolutely loved it. So you just find ways to connect, make them feel important, value them, have fun together, laugh, tell jokes, be silly.
I love it because they come and spend time in your world, but you also go and spend time in their world.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important, I think. And for you guys, that takes a lot of effort to go spend time in their world. If you've got to leave the house, go somewhere else geographically, navigate another venue or whatever you're doing. Right. It's a lot of work for you. But I love that you make time for it.
Yeah, it's been a great blessing to our lives.
Well, thank you both for being on the channel today with me. I love the things that you've shared, and I know that people will enjoy reading your book. I noticed that you honored people in it. You mentioned names and made sure that you let people know that you appreciated them. And I noticed, you know, there were quite a few names in there, and I could tell that that was an intentional thing you were doing as you were telling your story, just really acknowledging the roles that various people had in your life that you appreciated.
Yes, and when our 3 children read the first draft of the book, because I got it about 90% written, and we had them read it.
Mm-hmm.
They all said, "Oh, you need to make the chapter longer where it talked about people in the church who helped out," because they said that the help we received from friends and people within our church has had like a lifelong effect on them, just on their attitudes towards church and other people. And so we expanded that chapter. It was fairly easy to do, you know, because there were so many people who helped out. But that is a big part of our story, is to be willing to let other people help. It's nice to give them instructions on I need this and I need that, but you have to be willing to let them into your life. Yeah. And that's a big part of the story of how how God brought us through.
Okay, well, I will be sure and put the link to your book on the channel so that people can order it. And thank you again for taking the time to share with us today.
So, thank
Thanks,
you, Cheryl.
Cheryl.
I want to read something their daughter Amy wrote last year. She says, "My family's loss was like a big ugly stump sitting in our front yard for everyone to see. It's hard to camouflage a wheelchair, but my mom and dad decided they could plant a garden around that stump. That stump, by God's grace, could be made beautiful. And with the help of our amazing little church, our family made a beautiful garden in the midst of our loss. 35 years later, the stump is still there and the scars remain. But today, my 4 children walk around that stump and play in the garden and see the beauty that can be created from ashes. They know and see the power of the church, the beauty in the body of Christ, serving and caring and making gardens alongside people. The gospel has grown up in me, and now it is growing up in them. They each will bear their own scars, but they will also have the opportunity to plant a garden because they have seen it done."